So welcome to the Mompowerment podcast. My name is Ithar.
I'm Ramatan.
In our last episode, we were actually talking about how relationships within a couple can actually change post becoming parents and entering motherhood. But there's another relationship that also changes when we enter motherhood, and that would be friendships. So essentially today's topic, we're going to cover how, friendships can change and evolve when we enter the role of parenting and becoming moms specifically. What does that look like? How we experienced it, and we're just going to kind of dive into that, what it would look like. And then after that, we're going to share some of the things that we looked into to see how can we navigate it. So again, we're not experts. When we share tips and tricks, we're not sharing them because we are experts in the field. We're actually learning and going through this role together or experiencing it. So what we're really doing is that we're doing the research to share it with you so that we can all test it together and see what kind of works. But I think we have this need to clarify that we're not experts in this. What we're doing is sharing our lived experiences and creating that sense of community, because that's what we feel motherhood nowadays is missing. That sense of village that we keep talking about, that we're still looking for. So
Okay.
So that's what we're covering today.
So my experience, what I think a lot of moms can resonate with, basically when you have a child, everything changes at once, right? We've talked about this before. You have different routine, especially in the early months, you're still adapting all that, and that can put a strain on some friendships, especially friendships where the other person is not a mom yet, or maybe is in a different stage of motherhood too. So everything, once you become a mom, everything changes. Your time changes, your energy changes, everything kind of shifts, and you as well as a mom, you change as a person as well, right? We've discussed this before. There's a shift that happens in your own sense of self and how you see the world, how you see yourself, all that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience. I feel like for me, when I had my first child especially, I think I was one of the first ones from our little friend group to have a baby. And I was navigating through all these different emotions and trying to figure out what works for me, what works for the baby, all that. And at the same time, I didn't feel like people really understood what I was going through. And I didn't expect them to, but at the same time, it did change the friendships a little bit. I wasn't as available, of course. And especially I want to say with my first child, I was very each mom has her own way of doing things. My way of doing things was I was only nursing him. I wasn't really open to the idea of formula, or I didn't know enough about it, so I was scared of it. So I wasn't using formula, and my experience with pumping and all that was horrible. So this baby was stuck to me for the first year. I had to bring him everywhere, So that in itself makes having friendships a little bit harder, because I can't really go out without him. I can't really, people are at work during the day. I'm going out during the day,
True.
So all of these things, the different schedules, the baby needing to be there or not be there, all of these little things add up, and they create, distance in friendships. And some friendships stuck and others drifted, and that's okay. And I think as time goes by, you can understand that it's okay that some friendships drift. And you start to let go of that guilt. In the beginning, sometimes you might miss certain connections, of course, but if a friendship is gonna drip, for me, in my own experience, if a friendship is not gonna withstand me being a mom, then it's not made for me, right? It's not the right friendship for me. So what was your experience?
I totally relate to that, and especially from the first baby approach, and to your point, it's true that you became a mom first and you didn't really have a lot of other younger moms with you. I have a different experience in the sense that by the time I became a mom, a lot of other friends became moms at the same time too, or had just recently become a mom. So the dynamic there is different because I see that there's others that understand, except I have friends that I'm very close to that didn't necessarily have kids and don't necessarily, I don't know, like, again, this is me just assuming because it's my perception of it, but I don't think they necessarily understood why I was rigid on certain things.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking for my own peace. Like, kind of what you're saying, you're like, I didn't venture into formula or I stuck to this because that's what was working for you. And especially when you're a first time mom, we're scared of everything because we don't know.
Exactly.
And so based on whatever research we read, we're like, oh, I need to follow this. And I felt like, for example, in my case, it was all about the sleep training, which really helped me in some aspects, but I felt like I got sucked into that trap too because my experience with my second was different because I let go of the schedule the same way. At first I was like, I need to be like this, So again, it's hard from the aspect where I did see that relationships kind of changed is the type of space and time I can give to certain things. I know for sure I still felt a little bit disappointed that some relationships kind of shifted or changed, or I'm like, I'm a busy mom too.
Yeah.
We're all now busy moms, but how do we put effort into our friendships? And it's not about withstanding something, and it's not about expecting something in return, but at the end of the day, we are all busy. So if we're expecting a village, but we're not showing up when a village calls us, then it becomes hard to feel like, how is that kind of fair? Because at the end of the day, there's different things to consider in relationship dynamics because there's our friendships, but we have to also keep in mind that we're also growing older because relationships with friends and whatever, the more that where our personalities start to develop, the more our priorities shift, the more our realities are shifting. I find that our social circle becomes smaller in general. And then you add the layer of kids, then you kind of want to start hanging out with people that have kids, either similar age groups, or because then it becomes harder to find time to do things if you have friends that have older kids, they have maybe a bit more liberty to do things that you can't if you have a baby attached to you all the time, So there's different things to consider. And then there's the partners. So if I want to do stuff with friends, but then we have kids, and plus I want to drag my husband with me, I need to make sure that they all connect, that. And I feel like that's the part where, for me personally, I find that I end up carrying that responsibility of I need to make sure everyone is connecting and that we're all comfortable, that the kids are entertained. I know when we plan things, you're like, okay, but is my son gonna enjoy something because he's a little bit older? So because you're the mom, you're paying attention to all of these things. Whereas, sometimes dads are just like, so where are we going?
Exactly.
That's it. And we're thinking, okay, do we have toys for them? Do we have this? And so when you add friends, then we're all thinking about our own things, and then it becomes hard because we're all trying to find our own peace. So then it becomes a struggle. And I feel like that's where I was like, it's a bit more challenging.
But there is a certain grief too. With not just with letting go of certain parts of yourself before motherhood, but also with the friendships. Some friendships you really thought okay, this is gonna be a friendship for life kind of thing, and after motherhood things changed. And I think it is part of just a natural evolution. As time goes by, you focus more on the friendships that are more quality friendships versus quantity, which is normal. It happens in every stage of life. Even after high school, after university, you start to have less and less friends, but it's more about the quality of the friendship. And I feel like the friendships that really developed more and lasted were more the family friendships, because now we have kids, and if we want to see each other more, it's so much easier and more fulfilling if everybody knows each other and the husbands know each other and are friends and we're friends. Those are the friendships that really lasted in this season of life.
It's true. And I think when you're talking about that grief, it's also, I think, something that's important to talk about is that we also change. We're also evolving.
Exactly.
It's not the friendship is not just changing like that. It's because we're also changing. our vision of things, our priorities are shifting. Maybe like even if we have two friends that both became parents at the same time, but they might not experience it the same way. They
Yeah.
might not value things the same way. They might still have different perceptions on certain things. It doesn't mean that it's going to click.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the part where it's also hard, because motherhood can also change you, or like parenthood can also change you. That's what's changing the dynamic in a friendship, because you might not see parenting the same way.
Exactly.
You might not see, you know, the lifestyle the same way. You might not be going through the same lifestyles, you know. Your relationship with your partner might change. Like, you know, if your relationship is being tested by the fact that you have now kids, it's going to change your friendships too, because, you know, you might isolate yourself more.
Yeah.
You know, you might not want to participate in certain events, or maybe you'd like to. For example, you're having a gathering with just your girlfriends, but there's nobody to watch your kids because maybe your partner can't really do it for whatever reason it is. And then again, that adds to that the different layers of what drifts into relationships.
Yeah.
And so it makes it challenging. Like I think there's just a lot of factors that can fall into it, but then grieving all of it is hard. Like that's what I find a bit the hardest, because I think that's where sometimes I still have certain expectations and then I get disappointed.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, but I get split, you know, and you know, I'm a Libra. So I always see like the different sides of things. And I find what's hard for me is that I empathize and I feel for the person that's going with whatever how they're experiencing life.
Yeah.
But then I also carry empathy for myself. I'm like, but how is that fair to me?
Yeah.
Why do I get the short end of the stick? Why am I trying to show up, but then accepting the fact that I'm getting hurt in the process? But then I'm like, but I also understand, because I can see, like, you know, it's hard to juggle it all, you know, like how do you split yourself in different directions? And that's why I find like the only control I have is, you know, how I receive things and how I feel about things, versus putting that blame on, like, they're not doing this or they're not doing that.
Yeah.
I have to learn to let go. Like that's the part where I find that it's the hardest, at least for me. I feel like that's where I always find myself struggling, because I see both sides and I want to empathize, but I'm like, how do I hold space for myself? Like, how do I set certain boundaries without it making look like I'm being rude or mean or dismissive?
Yeah.
But I'm also trying to protect my own heart, you know, like it's not things that I really ever thought about before.
Yeah.
As a mom. And yeah, so I don't know if that resonates for you. Or
yeah, of course. For me, it's more about like the friendship that really stayed, or the friendships that are more like aligned with family, with, you know, that they have. That's not to say like I can't have friends who don't have kids. I can still, you know, I still do have friends who don't have kids, and it's just, of course I don't see them as much. Of course, like, we have very different lives, so we might not understand each other as much. And also I feel something strange that I've been trying to kind of work on, because I don't really understand it. It's like I tend to be more friends with people who have the same parenting style as me. And I mean, I guess that's natural, but I find that it's a little bit like, I'm not trying to judge anybody, and that shouldn't, I feel like I have a little bit of guilt with that. I don't know if you've experienced that as well, but like some of the friendships that have really drifted was because like I didn't like the person's parenting style, or I didn't like the way that she was bringing up her kids or whatever, and it didn't resonate with how I was doing things. So there was some kind of like tension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And the thing is, it's like, to your point, it's not about judging the other person. It's that when it's not aligning, it makes your life complicated too. Because if you're in a situation where you're going out all together and you raise your kids one way and the other family raises their kids other way, kids end up comparing each other, and then it becomes your problem. Or, you know, like it's the same thing as, you know, I think the most common example is either the sweets or the no screen. You know, like if you have one family that's very pro screen and then you have one family that's completely screen free, it might be hard to connect. And I know I'm just using that as an example, but it might be a challenge for some because those don't work out. But then if you find two people that have a balance, or like, You know, when it's like a rainy day, let's have a movie night all together, and they're open to it. And then maybe another day, it's really beautiful out, let's all go to a park and no screen. So it makes it easier because then you're not trying to tell your kid, like, you know, you can't have this because this is what we do. It becomes a struggle, and then it comes across as judgmental or and stuff like that, and that's where the sensitivities start to come in. So I think like I can see how that happens. And you know, interestingly enough, because we're talking about other friendships, but we're friends too. You know, like how I find that even for us, our relationship changed and evolved
after
with time. You know, like when you first became a mom, I remember like we didn't really see each other as much, and then we held on to like seeing each other with like at Christmas when everything's closed. We
used to see each other once a year.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because of my like.
It's not because of you,
me,
but
like,
that's the part where I didn't get it. You know, I also didn't get it, and I think that's the part where it's interesting to see how things change. Like, you know, because I'm hearing you talk about it, but I'm like, you know, I was that friend that didn't necessarily get it, and then like we're seeing it evolve, and then like with the second, something that's interesting. I wasn't a parent then, but COVID happened. And so COVID forced everybody to slow down. And we still ended up seeing each other a bit more, even though it was COVID. But we were working from home. So we started making like the effort. Oh, and I moved to a closer area to you. So we were on the same part of the island. That had a contribution. Our husbands get along. So then we noticed, we're like, oh, our husbands really get along. So we're like, okay, this is helpful. And then we decided to just make it easy by meeting up at picnics. So I wasn't a parent yet, but we knew, for example, your kids need to be entertained too. Like we can't just be like, come over and like.
You understood.
Exactly. So we were going to parks or whatever, and we made it happen. And then I entered that world, and then I felt like you already knew, so you showed me a lot more empathy that I wish I knew and understood more of back then. And then we had the privilege of experiencing your third and my second together. And now we practically see each other almost like weekly, you know, or and like we had this idea to do it together, but then we started aligning more. Like we started seeing, you know, areas where we really see things the same way or value things the same way. We made it easy between us. But I think that's what's important to also pay attention to and hold on, is that we're both putting effort and we're allowing our relationship to evolve. You know, and I think we've been honest also with each other, and we, you know, check in with each other. We're not assuming for the other person. So
no, we have that space to, you know, if we have plans and I say, hey, like it's not gonna work out today or whatever, like you can understand and I can understand, and you know. But I was gonna talk about that too. I didn't want to mention that like sometimes when you're going through motherhood and like other friends maybe don't understand or are not in the same like experiences as you at the moment, you might drift apart, but then it might come back later. That's what you were mentioning, that we drifted for a long time because I was going through all these things and like other people around me weren't. But then it actually made us stronger in the end. So it's not like a lost cause. If there's a friendship that really like you feel like is really worth still working on and all that, and it's just not just the effort is not just one-sided kind of thing, there's a very big possibility that it will come back after the other person has children. So
it's true. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's the thing. I think that's if we end up carrying that resent, it's only harming us. You know, when you end up feeling like upset with somebody, but just carrying it and the person doesn't necessarily know or understand, then, you know, it has an impact, you know. And like at the same time, I think it's the more we talk about what we're going through at the same time. So, you know, like I have a really good friend that isn't a mom yet, but inshallah soon to be a mom. We always saw each other with the kids, but what they made easy for us is that they always came over, you know. And then she would feel bad and say, you know, I feel like you're always hosting us. I'm like, yeah, but you're actually making it easier for me. So because I get to enjoy the rest of the night when I put my kids to sleep. And I can do that. And I'm one of these people that I grew up with, for example, my mom not necessarily taking us everywhere with her. which is something I appreciated and respected about her. Like in retrospect now, at first I was like when I was young, I'd be like, why don't you take us anywhere? But now I'm like, she valued her time too.
Yeah.
You know, her own friendships and connections and stuff like that. So I'm like, I need to find that balance for myself where I'm like, I don't have to do everything with my kids. Like, and I find that now because they're a bit more, not independent, but they're older, they understand it's easier to leave them, you know? So I feel like that also contributes to what you were just saying of it could be a temporary phase and it comes back. But during that temporary phase, rather than being victims of it, of like, nobody checks in on me and stuff like that, what are you also doing to keep those relationships alive? Like, even if you can't always show up at certain things, how are you checking in? How are you being a good friend when you can be, rather than just put the blame on the other person? Because I think that's what creates that build, and we need to just pay attention to that a bit more, I find. But yeah.
Well, that's exactly like what Mel Robbins talks about in the Let Them theory. I think we've mentioned it a little bit before briefly, but basically it's to remove that guilt from you, right?
Yeah.
It's if a friend is not reaching out, or let's say you see like that some of your friends had a gathering or whatever and you weren't invited, it's to just let go of that guilt. It's to let them, you know, they didn't invite you, let them. And also look at yourself, like if you're not putting any effort to either check in with your friends or you know, I know sometimes it's hard with kids, that's part of like life and motherhood. It becomes harder. But if you're not doing anything on your part, then you can't expect also them to be, you know. So to let them do whatever they're gonna do, basically, and also to look at your own self and see like, okay, well, what can I do, kind of thing. So let go of that guilt and look forward, kind of thing. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes you're gonna decide to invest more into a certain friendship, and sometimes it's just gonna be like, okay, it's gonna drift, and I'm gonna let it drift, and it's not a friendship that I want to invest more time into.
I think that's the part that I was talking about, how for me I find that it's hard to conciliate the two. And I keep trying to look at, you know, what belongs to me, what is my need behind it. And, you know, an example of the let them that I was thinking about was, I know that I had a need to build a sense of community for my kids the same way that I grew up with one. And because of what my parents allowed me to have, that sense of community and bringing us to, for example, the mosque and having friendships that grew up with us, I value that. And I know I have friends that even if I don't see them all the time, when life is hard, they show up somehow. You know, there's different ways that they show up. And I want that for my kids. I keep thinking, like, I never really thought about these things, but I'm like, what if something happens to me? Who's going to be there for them? Who's going to show up for them? Who's their community, you know? And even just for my husband, you know, like I'm thinking about that. It's not even just about my kids, but even for him, like, how is he going to take care of the kids by himself? And like all of that aspect. So when I think about these things, I'm like, how do I create that for my kids? So then I decided, you know, like, let me see how can I connect with the community again and find ways to do it, because I have a need for that. But I was like, okay, am I putting effort into something that's going to meet that need? I don't know. I'm testing it out. I'm going to see. But I have to also accept the fact that maybe other people don't have the same exact need. So I still have to, it doesn't mean I have to give up on it and be a victim of it. You know, it's just looking at, are there other ways I can meet that need? You know, like how can I replace it in a way where I still feel like I'm giving my kids a sense of community, family, experiences, just memories, you know. And that's why I love, for example, when we make the effort to go to take the kids to a park together or experience something together, because they associate things now with it. Oh, do you remember when we did this with them? Or do you remember when Remy did this? Or do you remember when, you know, so I feel like that's what's nice for them. And I'm like, okay, but I'm meeting my need that way. I might not need to do it the other way. And it goes back to the let them, you know, like I'm letting go of, like, you know, letting people do whatever they need to do, because maybe they're serving their own needs in a different way. And how do I protect myself too? Because at the end of the day, it's all still effort for us, you know, like it's just where should I put that effort that is going to bring me back something that aligns with my values or my needs and stuff like that, rather than take it on carry it in a negative way,
Yeah.
how can I turn it into more positive energy? Because at the end of the day, if it's not serving me the way that I need to do it, why am I carrying that load after?
Exactly.
And if I'm carrying the load because I think it might serve other people, but that's their responsibility now.
Yeah.
Either you carry your load
Exactly.
or you do it yourself, because it's not serving me the way I thought. And I think that's the part where I'm still trying to find how to conciliate, because it's new to me too, you know?
Yeah. We're all going through these many changes,
Yeah.
you know, at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know, like, you know, we're kind of touching on how these friendships changes and stuff like that. And I think part of all of this is going back to accepting the fact that we're also changing. Our relationship with ourselves are changing. Like, you know, we're evolving. We might be more aware of things that we didn't pay attention to before. So it kind of goes back to our first episode when we're talking about the self-care, you know? And I think navigating our relationships with our partners, navigating our relationships with our friends, allows us to also navigate our relationship with ourselves and look at, you know, what version of myself do I want to be? What am I working towards? How am I going to get there? Who are the people that I trust will allow me to get there? And how do I make space for that?
And what will bring me peace as well in my life. Yeah.
So I think that's the part where we have to accept those parts of the grief process, so that we can get to the last stage of acceptance. You know, we have to kind of go through those and accept, you know, we might deny that certain relationships are changing. We might try to negotiate and think that there's different ways that we can make it work, but then we might eventually go towards acceptance and realize it's okay that this changed.
Yeah.
I changed too.
Exactly.
And there's going to be different ways that will show up for each other. But right now, in this current season of life, this is where I'm at.
Yeah, definitely. So this is what we have for the topic of friendships after motherhood. We hope that it resonated with you and that you can kind of find a little bit of peace through what we discussed in your friendships, your own friendships after motherhood. On the next episode, we'll be discussing the topic of mom rage, which is a pretty controversial topic, but a lot of people are going through it, so we do need to talk about it. Thank you so much for listening and for participating and sending us DMs or comments or whatever, participating in any way you can. And thank you for supporting us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.